All right, welcome. I'd like to say hello. My name is Mary Jo Sharp. I am a Christian apologist, and I run the website Confident Christianity and a nonprofit organization as well. I am your moderator for today's debates. This is the first in a series of 4 debates between Christians and Muslims. Today's topic is the Qur'an miraculous? Before we begin, I'd like to say a few thank yous. First of all, to the Glenwood campus of Coastal Community Church for provision of a facility for us to host these debates. Also for their willingness to support this lively and passionate practice of debate. I'd also like to thank Acts 17 Apologetics for organizing the debates and for our Muslim apologists for being willing to engage in this activity. Our debaters today, on my right, is the Muslim apologist Osama Abdallah. He is creator of the website www.answering-christianity.com, which is one of the largest Muslim apologetic websites on the internet. He has a master's in computer science and is an experienced debater on a variety of topics. On my left is Christian apologist Nabeel Qureshi, co-founder of Acts 17 Apologetics. He is a former Muslim who has a Master of Arts in Christian Apologetics from Biola University, is working on a medical doctorate at Eastern Virginia Medical School. He is also an experienced debater covering a variety of topics, including the deity of Jesus and who was Jesus. Today's topic is the Qur'an miraculous. This is a topic upon which the foundation of the Islamic faith is built. The Muslim holy book is said to be a miraculous gift of God, a perfect revelation to the Prophet Muhammad. However, the skeptic would argue that the Qur'an is flawed, that it contains errors, scientific errors, errors of transmission, making it historically problematic in the textual integrity of the Qur'an. So today's discussion will look deeply into the validity of both sides of the claim that the Qur'an is a perfect revelation of God. The format of our debate will include opening arguments of 30 minutes each, starting with Osama. And then we will have first rebuttals of 15 minutes apiece, followed by 10 minutes second rebuttals. We will then have a crossfire of 2 minutes each, 4 rounds of crossfire. And then we will conclude with 5 minutes each. Some final remarks before we let the debaters get up here is please take this time to turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate to be courteous to our debaters. And also let me remind you that both sides will be presenting material that will push the buttons of the opposing views. Please also be courteous to the debaters at all times. And let me invite you to question what it is you believe and see if it stands up today to the evidence presented. All right, without further ado, Osama, you are first.
Thank you very much, Mary Jo. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me here today. It's definitely a privilege for me to be here. I'd like to start by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most merciful, most beneficent. I start my presentation. قُلْ رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِنْ لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُوا قَوْلِي. Oh Allah, expand my chest, ease my task for me, and remove the impediment from my speech so that they may understand what I say. My name is Osama Abdallah, as Mrs. Mary Jo mentioned. I'm the owner of www.answering-christianity.com. And today I'm gonna be debating Mr. Nabeel on whether the Noble Qur'an is scientific or not. It is very important to keep in mind throughout this debate that Allah Almighty's choice of specific words was for a divine purpose because they carry deeper meanings in them than any other ordinary Arabic word. To start, let us look at the following divine promise or prophecy from Allah Almighty. That's in Noble chapter 41, verse 53. We will show them our signs in the universe and inside themselves, until it will become quite clear to them that it is the truth. Is it not sufficient as regards your Lord that He is a witness over all things? Now, right off the bat, this noble verse states clearly that the scientific discoveries that Allah Almighty promised are a thing of the future. So right away, this noble verse refutes the question about if the noble Qur'an was, if the noble Qur'an was miraculous, then how come the early Muslims were not scientists? The answer is simple. It's because they could not have possessed the knowledge. They were only mere Bedouins, farmers, and illiterate people. Now I'm gonna move right in to the universe, our universe. Noble verse, chapter 51, verses 6 through 8. وإن الدين لواقع والسماء ذات الحبك إنكم لفي قول مختلف. And verily judgment and justice must indeed come to pass by the sky of the hubuk. Truly you are in a doctrine discordant. Now before I get into the word hubuk, let me mention to you that I used several Arabic dictionaries. The biggest one is Lisan al-Arab, which consists of 10 big books describing what the Arabs of old how the Arabs of old understood the Arabic words. So if there's a specific word in the Noble Quran that you'd like to look up, the best source for you is to go to Lisan al-Arab dictionary. It translates as the tongue of the Arabs, and look up the word and see the poems that it was used in, the narrations, the proverbs, etc., the examples, the way people used it. So what does hubuk mean? Well, according to Lisan al-Arab dictionary, book 6, page number 21, and also the Muhit dictionary, page 862, and also Al-Wasit dictionary, Mu'jam al-Wasit, and other dictionaries, al-hubuk means ash-shad, which means to pull or to attract. Al-hubuk means ash-sha'r al-ja'd al-mutakassir, a curly and broken hair. Al-hubuk, an example of it, hubbik ash-sha'r, means ju'ida, made the hair curly. Al-hubuk also means tara'iq al-nujum, the paths of the celestial bodies. Al-hubuk means al-mahbuk, ma ujida amalu, what has been perfected or done successfully. Mahbuk also means qawiyyun shadid, strong and mighty. Al-hubuk also means ajada nasjuh, weaved it with mastery. Also nasij, which is one of the meanings of it, means web. And hibak means siyaj, fence, means fence, and muhtabik means interwoven or intersecting. Well, here's Allah Almighty said that our universe is a universe of hubuk. Well, here's a picture of NASA, from NASA, computer-generated NASA picture, that shows the universe. And it does look like exactly the way the way the words were defined in the Arabic dictionaries. The way the Arabs of old understood them, exactly this is how the universe looks like. It does look like a curly, broken hair, and it does look like a web, and all the other things that I mentioned. Moving on. And also, by the way, quoting NASA and also here ScienceDaily.com, probing the cosmic web of the universe, new light on dark energy. It says here, the technique is based on well-known phenomena namely the fact that apparent motion of distant galaxies results from the two effects, the global expansion of the universe that pushes the galaxies away from each other, and the gravitational attraction of matter present in the galaxy's neighborhood that pulls them together, creating the cosmic web. The cosmic web. This is what NASA and ScienceDaily.com are saying, not me. Creating the cosmic web of large-scale structures. Moving on, looking at Noble verse, chapter 55, verse 37. فَإِذَا انشَقَّتِ السَّمَاءُ فَكَانَتْ وَرْدَةً كَالدِّهَانِ. When the sky splits asunder or explodes and turns rose-colored like paint. Well, I believe here, the sama here, the heaven or the sky is referring to our solar system, because Allah Almighty referred to our sky, that includes our sun and our moon and our planets as sama. So Allah Almighty is saying that when our sky, when our galaxy, when our solar system explodes, it will look like a red, it will not red, it will look like a rose-colored like paint. Well, lo and behold, here's also a NASA-generated picture. This is a NASA-captured picture, rather. I think I have this upside down. Doesn't really matter. Actually, no, I have it like this. Okay. This is the right way to look at it. This is an exploded galaxy that NASA captured from space. And when our galaxy explodes, it's going to look something like this. And guess what? It looks like a rose. Okay? And the Noble Qur'an said it. Moving on. Noble verse, chapter 41, verse 10, or rather, chapter 41, verse 12. I'm sorry, chapter 41, verses 11 through 12. ثم استوى إلى السماء وهي دخان فقال لها وللأرض آتيا طوعا أو كرها قالتا أتينا طائعين فقضاهن 7 سماوات في يومين وأوحى إلى في كل سماء أمرها. Moreover, he comprehended his design, in his design the sky, and it had been as smoke. He said to it and to the earth, come ye together, willingly or unwillingly. This is, by the way, symbolic, because Allah Almighty, when the earth is not like us. The earth communicates with Allah Almighty in its own way that Allah Almighty created for it. They said, the earth and our universe, or our sky, we do come together in willing obedience. And here, so Allah Almighty here said that in the 4th day, He comprehended, He finished creating our earth. Because Allah Almighty created the entire universe in six days. 6 God days, not our days. And on the 4th day, our solar system and the earth were finished. And but there were remnants of smoke. And I did not capture a picture for this, but the scientists, the Space Atlas, Heather and Hembest book, page 50, and also Horizons Exploring Universe Seeds, plate 9, from Association of Universities for Research in Anatomy Incorporated. They say the universe, they say a new star forming out of cloud of gas and dust, nebula, which is one of the remnants of the smoke that was the origin of the whole universe. So God Almighty said that the universe, or our solar system, was still smoky after its creation, because after the Big Bang there was a lot of smoke in the universe, and God Almighty said it, and again science confirmed it. And speaking of the Big Bang Theory, here's a Big Bang Theory. Noble verse, chapter 21, verse 30. I'm going to talk about the Big Bang Theory and the cosmic crunch. Do not the unbelievers see that the heavens and the earth were joined together, and then they were clothed, and then we clothed them asunder, we exploded them. We made from water every living thing. Will they not then believe? And also in Noble verse, chapter 51, verse 47, it's talking about the universe currently expanding. Okay? And the firmament, we constructed it with power and skill, and verily we are expanding it. لَمُوسِعُونَ is a verb of the Arabic noun wasi', vast. Musi'un meaning we're making it vaster, bigger, larger. And it's a continuous process. And here's a recent discovery from NASA that is only 8 years old. This is the cosmic crunch in the Noble Qur'an and in NASA. In Noble Qur'an, chapter 21, verse 104, the day that we roll up the heavens like a scroll rolled up for books, even as we produce the first creation, so shall we produce a new one. God talked in another noble verse that He will create another earth, and that earth we will resurrect from. There will be another Big Bang. So shall we produce a new one. A promise we have undertaken, truly shall we fulfill it. Well, here's what NASA is. If you go to map.gsfc.nasa.gov/universe/uni_shape, that's uni_shape, universe_shape.html. Okay? If you go there, here's what NASA says. The simplest version for the inflationary theory, an extension of the Big Bang theory, predicts that the density of the universe is very close to the critical density, and that the geometry of the universe is flat like a sheet of paper. God said He will roll the universe in the cosmic crunch like the scrolls are rolled. And NASA, just 8 years ago, said that the universe is flat like a sheet of paper. That is the result confirmed by WMAP science. So it's a confirmed fact. It's not just a theory. And I gave it a link. Go back to the video and rewind, and you can get the URL. Moving on, Allah Almighty talked about the earth losing all of its water, become completely dry, absolutely dry. وَإِنَّ لَجَعَلُونَ مَا عَلَيْهَا صَعِيدًا جَرْزًا. This is Noble verse, chapter 18, verse 8. And we will surely reduce whatever on earth to dry dust. Well, according to Wikipedia.org, if you look up the earth, it'll say that eventually, it says here, after 1 billion years, the earth will eventually lose all of its water. It will become absolutely waterless. Moving on, fertilizing winds create the rain. Allah Almighty said in Noble verse, chapter 15, verse 22, and we sent the fecundating or fertilizing winds, then caused the rain to descend from the sky, therein providing you with water through, etc. And here, Allah Almighty said in Arabic, وَأَرْسَلْنَا الرِّيَاحَ لَوَاقِحَ فَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً. I read it in English first. Well, here's what Wikipedia says, and other scientific websites as well. The growth of clouds and precipitation require that the winds fertilize the clouds with a quantity of microscopic particles called condensation nuclei. The smallest droplet of water is made up of at least 100 molecules. It is not easy for such a number to come together by a mere coincidence without there being nuclei to precipitate upon. And here also they say also coalescence is a process by which two or more droplets or particles merge during contact to form a single daughter droplet, female droplet, or bubble. That's what Wikipedia says. The miracle of the moon, moving on. Before moving on to the miracle of the moon, because there are several noble verses that talk about the moon, there are many lies that were invented against Islam. One of them is that we believe in the moon god. Well, here's what Allah Almighty said about the moon. Among His noble verse, chapter 41, verse 37, among His signs are the night and the day, and the sun and the moon. Adore not the sun and the moon, but adore God, who created them, if it is Him ye wish to serve. Okay, moving on. The S-shaped loops of the moon around the Earth. That's been confirmed by NASA and many scientists, and that is why we have eclipses, because the moon intersects the course, the orbit of the sun. The reason why it comes between the Earth and the sun is because its loop, its orbit around the Earth is like a number 8, or S loops. Allah Almighty said in Noble verse, chapter 36, verse 39. Now remember, Arabic does not have any letter that resembles the English letter S. Okay, so back then, the closest thing that Allah could compare this to was a dry date tree branch. And I provided 63 pictures, 63 pictures of date tree branches that resemble the English letter S on my website. You can check it out yourself, answering-christianity.com. Let me read the noble verse. وَالْقَمَرُ قَدَّرْنَاهُ مَنَازِلَ حَتَّى عَادَ كَالْعُرْجُونِ الْقَدِيمِ. That's noble verse, chapter 36, verse 39. And the moon, we destined it to return in stages until it comes back like a dried out branch of date tree. And like I mentioned, Arabic and Arabia in general does not have any letter that resembles the English letter S, or the number 8 in English. So there was no other thing to compare the orbit of the moon to. This was the closest thing Allah Almighty could use. And according to astronomy, Ohio State University's astronomy department, and reference.com, and also Columbia Electronic Encyclopedia, and also many pictures and animations, GIF files that I copied, they were free, and I copied on my website from physicsforum.com and others. They state that the moon's orbit around the Earth is S-shaped loops, and I have animations, 2 animations that demonstrate the moon's loop. Moving on. The moon reflects the light of the sun. Allah Almighty said in Noble Verse chapter 10 verse 5, وَهُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ ضِيَاءً وَالْقَمَرَ نُورًا وَقَدَّرَهُ مَنَازِلَ إِلَى etc. It is He, Noble Verse chapter 10 verse 5, it is He who made the sun to be a source of light, and the moon to be reflecting to the light of beauty, etc. We find in Tafsir Ibn Kathir, who's Tafsir means interpretation. We find in the interpretation of Ibn Kathir, a prominent and leading Muslim scholar in the 13th century. Okay, so this was many hundred years ago, before the Earth was discovered to be round. We discovered the following about the moon, that the moon has different emissions of light, from looking like a crescent to a half moon to a full moon, etc. Here, Ibn Kathir says, He created the night with its darkness and the day with its light, and they alternate without ceasing. And He created the sun with its shining light and the moon with its reflected light. And He allotted their stages and gave them separate orbits in heavens. There's another quote, but it's a little lengthy. I'm not going to link it. I'm not going to mention it for a time. But you can go to my website and check out the Moon Miracle and article and see it yourself. They're also here. Okay, moving on here. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Also, the splitting of the moon miracle. Allah Almighty said in Noble Verse, chapter 54, verse 1, وَاقْتَرَبَتِ السَّاعَةِ وَانْشَقَّ الْقَمَرُ. The hour of judgment approaches, and has approached, and the moon has been cracked or split. Okay, and here is a picture from NASA. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I forgot to show you the S-shaped, my apology, for the day tree branches. This is a day tree, a picture of the day tree branch, folks, and this is an emphasized one. Okay, the same picture, but I emphasize it. Notice the S shapes of the branches. Here's the original ones. Here's the ones that I emphasize. I hope the camera catches them, but you can see the S-shaped emphasis that I made. Okay, so that's that, and as to the moon cracking. Here's a NASA picture of the moon. There's a line, as you can see here in the picture. This line, NASA says, is as deep, it goes all the way around, 10 minutes, thank you. Goes all the way around the moon. And this line that you see is as deep as the Grand Canyon. Okay, so it's not, it's not shallow, it's very deep. And they say because the moon has cracked from ancient moon quakes, like we have earthquakes, the moon had violent moon quakes and it caused it to crack. And God Almighty mentioned it. Okay, the geology of the earth and its shape and movement. Gonna skip this. Okay. Allah Almighty said in Allah Almighty said that the earth is spherical. In Noble Verse, chapter 79, verses 79, chapter 79, verses 30 and 31. وَالْأَرْضُ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ دَحَاهَا أَخْرَجَ مِنْهَا مَاءَهَا وَمَرْعَاهَا. And the earth, moreover, has he dahaha, and he drawed from it its water and his pasture. According to Lisan al-Arab dictionary, dahaha means dafa'ahu wa rama bih, cause it to move, pushed, or through it. Okay, so Allah Almighty pushed the earth in space. And here's an example. Allah Almighty said, the noble verse, chapter 37, verses 8 through 9. وَيَقْذِفُونَ مِنْ كُلِّ جَانِبٍ دَحُورًا وَيَقْذَفُونَ مِنْ كُلِّ جَانِبٍ دَحُورًا وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ وَاصِبٌ. And they are, dahura is derived from daha, and they're cast away from every side, repulsed or pushed for they are under a perpetual penalty. Daha الصبي المدحاتة أي دفع الصبي المدحاتة means daha the boy has daha the rolling toy, meaning that the boy pushed the rolling toy, so he pushed it. Dahraja means to roll down. Okay, so again, the earth is moving in space. And also daha, try and pass through it here. Daha also means daha في الثرى بيتا إذا أوسعه. He expanded the house. Also daha الدحح, which is plural to daha, which means الأرضون الممتدة, the expanded earths. Also, so Allah Almighty said He expanded the earth and He caused its water to emerge from it. Well, lo and behold, here's a picture of the earth when our continents look like a jigsaw puzzle, by the way. Okay, if they look like they were all one piece of land, and it's true here. Our earth used to be one piece of land with almost no water in it, very minimum water. And when the water expanded, okay, then when the earth expanded, then the water emerged from it. Okay, of course, our atmosphere has to do with it too. But the point is, the expansion of the earth caused for all the massive amount of waters that we have today, covering 70% of our planet. The reason why we have so much water today is because it has expanded. Also, daha also means made it the best. And one of the companions of the Prophet's name, his name was Dahi al-Kalbi. Okay, and it means the leader or the best one from the group. And if you look at our Earth in our solar system, it is the best planet. I mean, it's the only planet that has water. It's the only planet that has life. It's the only planet that has beautiful scenic views that look like paradise. If you go to Honolulu or Europe or any place, or you come here, you'll see paradise. There's real life in Earth, and so it is the best planet in our solar system. And also, it made it spherical around here. دردحة من النساء التي طولها وعرضها سواء. The dardha from the woman is the one whose height and width look the same. Her height and her width are the same. She looks round. Okay, so and the Earth is round, spherical. Moving on, I'm skipping through things here. There's other meanings here, narrations that talk about the roundness. But I'm going to move on. How many minutes, sir, do I have? I'm sorry, 5? Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. Allah Almighty said also, He's moving. The earth is moving and suspended in space. Noble verse, chapter 77, verse 25. Alam naj'al al-arda kifata. Okay. Have we not made the earth kifata? Kifata, according to Lisan al-Arab here, book 1, page 807. Kifata, al-kafatu, it means al-kafat. صرفك الشيء عن وجهه. When you صرفك الشيء عن وجهه, when you push something to a different direction. Also, kifata means ينكفت أي ينصرف, to go away. Okay? And al-inkifat means al-insiraf, going away or leaving. Kifata أسرع في العدو والطيران means speeded in running and flying. Also, kaftun means سريع, fast. And kafit, which is derived from kifata, means سريع, خفيف, دقيق, fast, light, and precise. The Earth's orbit is precise. if it shifts to the right or the left 1 millimeter or 1 meter, I don't know about 1 millimeter, but 1 meter, it'll go in, it'll go astray and it'll collide with another planet. It'll go away, it'll stray away from its dedicated orbit. Kifata here also yadom wa yaqbud, contains and holds on. Okay, and Earth does contain, and it's also holding on. Al-kafit, al-quwwa ala al-nikah, al-quwwa ala al-jima', etc. Strength and power. I'm gonna skip all that, but anyway, it means everything, all the things that I mentioned here. Wow. Okay. What's next? Okay. Allah Almighty made the earth as cradle. Here, I'm gonna skip to this. Okay. Noble verse, chapter 20, verse 53. الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ مَهْدًا. It is He who has made the earth for you as mahd. Mahd means cradle. The same word used for Jesus Christ in Noble verse, chapter 19, verse 21, when his mother, Mary, peace be upon her and him, when she brought him to their people, and her people said, "Where'd you bring this child from? You're not married. How did you get pregnant?" And so one of the miracles of Jesus Christ was that he spoke, which removed the scandal from his mother. So otherwise, she wasn't going to get scandalized, And so the word mahd, he spoke from the mahd, from the cradle. He was a toddler, an infant, a suckling baby. Anyway, here, this is a picture of the Earth's orbit, looking like a cradle. Here, the Earth, I'm quoting here, the Earth circles the sun with its axis tilted 23.5 degrees. That tilt gives us our seasons. When the North Pole points away from the sun, the Northern Hemisphere experiences winter, and the Southern Hemisphere is summer. On the other side of the orbit, the situation is reversed because the Earth's rotation around the sun, different parts of the Earth are closer to the sun at different times throughout the year. I've captured a film. This is an image from a film that I posted on my website, a scientific film, a Western film, not an Arabic or Muslim one, that describes how the Earth's orbit around the sun, when it's finished, it's cradle. It tilts like a cradle. Okay? The film then goes on to explain the scientific details of equinoxes and solstice and southern and northern latitudes. All that talks about that. Okay, I'm going to skip one more thing. Allah Almighty said that He created us. In the rebuttal section, hopefully I'm going to get a chance to do it. We were created from a penetrating or piercing, that God Almighty said in Noble verse chapter, I'll get to it. He said He created the male and the female from a piercing nutfa. Nutfa means sperm. And here's a picture. Sorry if it's graphic. I apologize. But here's, I'm sure you all know it. This is a female egg, and that's a piercing male sperm. God Almighty said that He created the male and the female. He specified it from a piercing, a stabbing, a poking. This is according to Lisan al-Arab dictionary. Sperm, and this is what we have. It is a piercing sperm. Okay, that's why we're mean, the men, Anyway, okay. So thank you. I'll continue when I come back.
Okay. All right. Now we will have Nabeel Qureshi's opening statement. You also have 30 minutes.
All right, just give me a moment for the screen to turn back on. Nice and purple, just like I intended. And when do we begin time? Good. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to this debate here. As some of you know, I will be graduating from med school in a week, and I have a lot of you to thank for that because your prayers have helped bear me through, and I know I wouldn't have been able to get through this without your prayers. So thank you so much for that. And in 1 week, I'll have my MD, finally. So thanks for your prayers. Now we're going to turn to a topic of conversation that is extremely important. We're going to be talking about the Qur'an. The Qur'an plays an essential role in Islam. It has played an essential role since the very beginning of Islam. It marked the initial inception of the prophethood of Muhammad. Its contents define Sharia, and its recitation has been performed by billions of people over the past 1,400 years. More importantly, it was Muhammad's central claim to prophethood. When asked for a sign indicating his truth, Muhammad would point to the Qur'an and say that his sign was the Qur'an. According to Abu Ahmad Yasir Ghadi, a contemporary Muslim scholar, he says the Qur'an has been put forth as a miracle that can never be limited in its style, prose, or content. And this summarizes the Muslim sentiment very well. Because you see, I used to be a Muslim. I myself believe these things. I used to recite the Qur'an over 19 times a day while reading Salat. By the age of 5, I had read and recited the entire Qur'an in Arabic. Now, I didn't know what the words meant, but simply reciting the Arabic words, to me, held holy power. I had soon memorized many of the last chapters of the Qur'an. When I was around 7 years old, my father had taken portions of the Qur'an, written them out by hand, and then posted them on the wall throughout my room, so that whenever I had some time to myself, I'd look around my room and I'd see verses of the Qur'an, and I'd sit there and read them and memorize them. My grandmother and my mom would come in, and they would sit me down and say, this is how you properly recite the Qur'an, this is what these words mean. And gradually I memorized more and more of the Qur'an. As I grew older, I proclaimed these very words as miraculous, saying that they were infinite in meaning, infinite in nature, unchanging, unmatchable, miraculous in every single way, telling us insights into science, astronomy, and literary excellence. But I sit here before you now proclaiming, certainly the Qur'an is not miraculous, and it is certainly not the Word of God. Well, what happened? Why did I change my perspective so much? Well, the reason why is because instead of just listening to the folklore and tales that I had been told about the Qur'an, I decided to actually investigate the historical evidence myself. I also examined the most popular claims from Muslims regarding the miraculous nature of the Qur'an, and I found them all to be entirely lacking in persuasive power. Well, since I'll be a doctor in a week, I figure it would be good to get some practice examining things the way a physician does. Now, whenever a new patient comes to a physician's office, either in the ER or in a clinic, the very first thing the physician does is he takes a history and physical examination. And the history will usually be comprised of such questions as, what was the trigger of your illness? And, what was the course? Were there any unusual symptoms? And then after asking these things, the physician then goes on to ask about, or to conduct a physical examination, check the person's body for any sort of signs that will lead them towards a solid diagnosis. Well, we can do that today. How about we talk about getting the history of the Qur'an by discussing how its revelation started, then talk about any unusual events that might have occurred, and follow up by talking about the course of the Qur'an. And after getting this history, we then move on to examining the body of evidence as Muslims provide their claims for the miraculous nature of the Qur'an. So, let's start with the history. And as my attending physicians always told me, an excellent history can lead you very close to the final diagnosis. So, let's see if I can make them proud today. We're starting from the very beginning. The very first revelation of the Qur'an is told to us through Sahih Bukhari, which is the most trustworthy book of Islam, other than the Qur'an. Sahih Bukhari, it says, suddenly the truth descended upon Muhammad while he was in the cave of Hira. The angel came to him in it and asked him to read. The Prophet replied, I do not know how to read. The Prophet then added, the angel caught me forcefully and pressed me so hard that I could not bear it anymore. He then released me and asked me again to read, and I said, I do not know how to read. Whereupon he caught me again and pressed me a second time till I could not bear it anymore. He then released me and asked me to read, and again I replied, I do not know how to read. Thereupon he caught me for the third time and pressed me and then released me and said the first words of the Qur'an, Iqra bi ismi rabbika allazi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq. This is how the Qur'an started. So, at this point, we have to ask a simple question. Did this seem like a glorious, peaceful event? Absolutely not. It seems more like a frightening, violent event. This account said Muhammad was pressed so hard that he could not bear it anymore. Another account, that of Ibn Ishaq, says Muhammad was pressed so tightly he thought it was death. And the only reason he cooperated with the Spirit was so that he could be delivered. Now, I don't know about you, but if this were to happen to me, I'd be pretty frightened. Violent, forceful commands from an unknown spirit. Now, I've heard stories of divine inspiration, and this does not sound like it. If anything, it sounds demonic. In fact, this is what Muhammad himself thought. According to the earliest Muslim literature, Muhammad said, "Now none of God's creatures were more hateful to me than a poet or a man possessed. I could not even look at them. I thought, woe is me, a poet or a man possessed. I will go to the top of a mountain and throw myself down, that I may kill myself and gain rest." You heard that correctly. Muhammad, after receiving the initial revelation of the Qur'an, wanted to kill himself. This is found also in the most trustworthy book, Sahih Bukhari. It says he intended several times to throw himself off from the tops of high mountains. So according to the earliest and most trustworthy Muslim sources, Muhammad was violently overtaken by a spirit, received instruction, and as the spirit left him, he would panic, undergo a depression, and habitually attempt suicide. Now, we've barely gotten through the first part of the history, and already there's a red flag. These are not symptoms that were experienced by the past prophets. I mean, God spoke to Noah in Genesis 6. He spoke to Abraham in Genesis 12. He spoke to Moses in Exodus 3. He talked to Isaiah in Isaiah 6. Mary in Luke 1. And Jesus in Mark 1. In none of these cases did any of the people receiving revelation panic, undergo depression or anxiety, or attempt suicide. Now, there is one person in the Bible who does fit a similar constellation of symptoms and fits it exactly. That's Judas. Judas underwent the very same symptoms that Muhammad went. The same constellation of symptoms is consistent with one other person, that's Judas. But Judas, according to the Bible, was inspired by none other than Satan. John 13 and Acts 1. Is it possible, since there's consistent symptomatology, that both Judas and Muhammad were inspired by the same Satan? This leads to the next point in the history. Muhammad himself said that he had received revelations from Satan. According to approximately 37 ancient Muslim sources, the Qur'an had a revelation which, quote, Satan had cast on the tongue of the messenger of God. According to these accounts, Muhammad later repented for his grave error, and God forgave him for his mistake. But all the same, if Satan was able to put words into Muhammad's mouth, then what is there to say that the rest of the Qur'an is actually from God and not from Satan himself? There's little reason to think that. In contrast, there is a lot of reason to think that these revelations were not from God. Let us continue on with the history of the revelation of the Qur'an. As time went on, Muhammad received revelations that were in direct contradiction to his older revelation. A new revelation would come and it would contradict an old revelation from God. But this new revelation is said to abrogate the older one. Sometimes the abrogated text remained in the Qur'an, sometimes it didn't. But here's the point. Are these texts the Word of God, the eternal, everlasting Word of God? If they're in 1 second they're in the Qur'an, the next second they're not. No, of course not. They're not eternal, far from it. They were certainly fleeting, ephemeral. Put another way, the symptom of abrogation is more consistent with what we'd call a work in progress, not the eternal Word of God. The next pertinent point in the history of the Qur'an's record is the concept of ahruf. Now, I could try to explain it to you myself, but this symptom is quite perplexing. Allow me to quote Sahih Bukhari. The Khalifa Umar said, the Khalifa being after Muhammad died, a man named Umar became the Khalifa at this time, though Umar was still alive. He said, I heard Hisham reciting Surah Al-Furqan in a way different to that of mine. So I tied his garment round his neck and seized him by it and brought him to Allah's apostle and said, I have heard him reciting Surah Al-Furqan in a way different to the way you taught it to me. The Prophet ordered me to release him and asked Hisham to recite it. When he recited it, Allah's apostle said, it was revealed in this way. He then asked me to recite it. When I recited it, he said, it was revealed in this way. The Qur'an has been revealed in 7 ahruf, so recite it in the way that is easier for you. So what we have here is that the Qur'an is said to have been revealed in 7 different modes of revelation. What in the world is this about? What we do know is that we can't just say this is different types of accents or different types of dialects. Because we see here from Abu Dawood, this is regarding one example of the ahruf, each mode is sufficiently health-giving, whether you utter the words all-hearing and all-knowing, or instead all-powerful and all-wise. What is being said here? You can say either all-hearing and all-knowing or all-powerful, all-wise. It's all the same thing. So it's not just a dialectical difference, it's a difference in wording. This is perplexing indeed. It's so perplexing, in fact, that generations of Muslim scholars were entirely unable to grapple with it. One ancient scholar, As-Suyuti, listed over 40 different definitions of the word ahruf. Another scholar, Ibn Sadan, who was a grammarian and reciter of the Qur'an, declared that the true meaning of the ahruf can only be known to God. One contemporary scholar, Abu Ahmad Yasir Qadhi, says, the reason that such a great difference of opinion exists concerning the exact meaning of the ahruf is due to the fact that there does not exist any explicit narration from the Prophet Muhammad or the Salaf concerning the exact nature of the ahruf. So what does this all mean for our purposes? It means that, number one, the Qur'an has an escape clause for any of its mistakes and variants. Up to 7 different sets of variants can be found for a single verse, and a Muslim can just say, oh, it's a different ahruf, to try to say that the Qur'an is still perfectly preserved. This is awfully suspicious of what we would call a cover-up. Number 2, it makes the Qur'an appear to be of human origin for yet another reason. So as my attendings would say when I'm taking too long taking a history, how about we wrap it up? The last point I would like to bring up about the history of the Qur'an is a brief account of its collection. Between the time of Muhammad and Uthman was when the Qur'an was collected. During Muhammad's lifetime himself, there was no collection of the Qur'an. Shortly after Muhammad's death, there were a series of battles fought between Muslims and people who wanted to leave Islam now that Muhammad was dead. During those apostate wars, Abu Bakr, the next person who was in charge after Muhammad, sent out warriors who knew the Qur'an very well, thinking that God would preserve their lives. Well, hundreds of those warriors died in battle, and then Abu Bakr got concerned. So he called Zayd ibn Thabit, one of Muhammad's scribes, to collect the Qur'an into one book. Now Zayd, when he's told, hey Zayd, you need to collect the Qur'an, Zayd's response was, if they ordered me to shift one of the mountains, it would not have been heavier for me than ordering me to collect the Qur'an. Moving a mountain is easier than collecting the Qur'an, is what he said. Anyway, he went ahead and collected the book and he put it away. That book that was collected, that first Quranic book, was never copied, it was never published, it was never sanctioned as the official book of Islam. 18 years later, people were citing the Qur'an and they came up to Uthman and said, Uthman, we're reciting the Qur'an differently from one another, save your nation. Uthman then asked for the Qur'an to be brought back to him, and he brought the same scribe, Zayd, to come back, and he ordered Zayd and 3 other men to revise the Qur'an and make copies. After this was done, Uthman ordered all existing manuscripts and fragments of the Qur'an, get this, to be destroyed by fire. Every single evidence of the Qur'an was destroyed. All that was left were the copies that he made. Now, there are many telling things about this point in the history, such as Zayd's reaction to having to collect the Qur'an, the multiple revisions of the Qur'an, and finally the burning of the manuscripts. Suffice it to say, these symptoms are again inconsistent with the concept of a miraculous book, and much more consistent with a human process. However, there's much more to say about this, and we'll return to this point in the end of our account. So that's what you would call a focused or pertinent history. At this point in a patient encounter, a physician would usually go back and think about the things he's learned from the history before moving on. What we've seen so far is, number 1, the revelation of the Qur'an was violent, it was frightening, it caused depression, anxiety, and recurrent suicide attempts. This symptomatology was then heightened by satanic revelations, by abrogation, by ahruf, the escape clause, and also by the sketchy collection of the Qur'an. After just half of this patient encounter, the condition of this patient does not seem to be miraculous. Far from it, it appears malignant. Let's move on to the examination of the miracle claims of the Qur'an. Now, in order to defend the miracle claims of the Qur'an, Muslims use many arguments. In my experience, the 4 most common arguments are the arguments from literary excellence, mathematical marvels, scientific accuracy, which was the crux of the argument today, and also perfect preservation. We'll go ahead and take it from the top. The argument from literary excellence. It is one of the few arguments the Qur'an actually provides for its own miraculous nature. In 5 separate verses, the Qur'an issues a challenge to anyone who thinks that the Qur'an is not from God, i.e. us, non-Muslims, to try to create a book like it, or to create a chapter like it. In other words, imitate the Qur'an to whatever degree, depending on the individual challenge. The Qur'an says that when disbelievers attempt to write something like the Qur'an, they will realize how miraculous the Qur'an is in its literary excellence, and they will just desist from it and realize that they were mistaken. Well, there are many problems with this argument from literary excellence. First, it is non sequitur. It doesn't logically follow. Just because something is excellent in literary quality, it does not mean it is from divine origin. Second, we have inconsistent application of this criteria. If Da Vinci or Shakespeare or Mozart said, hey, make a painting like mine, or write a play like mine, or make music like mine, otherwise you have to admit I'm from God, no one would believe them. We wouldn't say that they're of divine origin. Certainly no Muslim would. So the Muslim who provides this argument is necessarily inconsistent in their application of criteria. Third, and get this test is for the non-believers. It is telling non-believers to just try and write something like the Qur'an and see what happens. They themselves, the non-believers, are the judges, and they themselves are supposed to realize that they cannot match the Qur'an. So I should not be able to say that there is anything that rivals the Qur'an. But I can tell you right here and now, there's plenty that rivals the Qur'an. Psalm 23 comes to mind. The Carmen Christi comes to mind. In fact, the entire Bible comes to mind. The problem here is, though, is not, hey, Muslim, go compare what I just said to the Qur'an. No, I'm the one who's doing the comparison. I'm the judge. I should not have been able to just say what I said if the challenge of the Qur'an is true. Finally, and most poignantly, the Qur'an has been disproven on this point over and over and over again. First by Al-Nadr, who was a man in Muhammad's time who used to hear revelations of the Qur'an and say, hey, I can write something better than that. That by itself breaks the challenge. Second, by a man named Abdallah ibn Sa'd, who was one of Muhammad's scribes, and he would add or substitute his own words into the Qur'an whenever Muhammad was receiving revelations. And Muhammad would hear those things, and he would say, okay, your words are just as good. Third, by Ali Dashti, the famous contemporary grammarian who said, the Qur'an contains sentences which are incomplete and not fully intelligible without the aid of commentaries. Aberrations in the language have given scope to critics who deny the Qur'an's eloquence. And fourth, by a book called The True Qur'an. Now this book is a modern book that has been issued specifically to answer the challenge of literary excellence. It was written in the style of the Qur'an, and it is often confused for the Qur'an. That's how similar it is. In fact, Muslims often confuse the True Qur'an for the Qur'an. So we have no less than 4 reasons to reject the argument from literary excellence, including logical fallacy and also proven failure of the fallacious challenge. By the way, this one fact is enough to disprove the miraculous nature of the Qur'an. But we have many more reasons. Let's go on to the rest of our examination today. We're now going to talk about the mathematical marvels. Now, I've seen many claims for mathematical marvels online. My debate opponent today, Osama Abdallah, has posted on our website. I don't know what these numbers mean, but I do know that such amazing accuracy is abnormal. And it could not have been done by a human, especially 1,400 years ago. So the claim here is that there are such cool numerical patterns in the Qur'an that it must be from God. Well, let me tell you, the first thing that should already be obvious to all of us is that it doesn't matter how many cool numerical patterns there are in a book, it certainly doesn't necessarily mean it's from God. It's non sequitur. Beyond that, extensive numerical patterns are commonplace. For example, the Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven has been analyzed. Just the first 2 sentences were analyzed. And the number 7 was found many, many times in just the first 2 verses. Another example you can find online, I think this is hilarious. There was a moderator of a listserv, and she just had her signature. It just had her name and her position as the moderator. And that one 2-line signature was analyzed, and it was found the number 19 appeared over 74 times in that signature. Well, according to most of the arguments that people provide for numerical excellence, or mathematical marvels, this would mean that her signature had to be inspired from God. But we haven't broached that issue today, so let's not waste too much time talking about that. Unless he brings it up in the rebuttal, then I'll bring it up again. Let's move on to the argument from scientific accuracy, which is where he mostly focused today. The first thing I want to mention about that is a quotation by one Muslim. He says, "The Qur'an was revealed 14 centuries ago, mentioned facts only recently discovered or proven by scientists. This proves without doubt that the Qur'an must be the literal word of God, and that the Qur'an was not authored by by Muhammad or by any other human being." I must say this. This is the first of the main arguments that Muslims use that even begins to approach not being non sequitur. So, props for that. Unfortunately, the alleged scientific insights generally do not exist. They can usually be sorted into one of three categories. The first being, let's see if I put these up here, taken out of context. You start looking at these scientifically miraculous insights and you realize that they're just statements that have been taken out of context. Number two, some of them are just blatantly inaccurate. And number three, you have some statements that are touted as being scientific insight that were actually obvious fact at the time of Muhammad's life. Osama has provided many of, all of his statements fall into one of these three. We'll deal with a lot of them during the rebuttals. Right now I'd like to focus on the blatantly inaccurate, however. Here's one of those statements. This is a statement on astronomy from the Qur'an. It talks about stars. We actually have many statements about stars in the Qur'an, 4 of them. But this one, essentially what it's saying here is that stars are used to decorate the lower heavens. And then they're also used as a guard against jinn or demons. And if a jinn or a demon tries to steal something from heaven, it will be chased by a flaming fire. In other words, the star will pursue that demon. Let's think about it here for a moment. It certainly seems that the author of the Qur'an has confused stars in heavens with meteors traversing the Earth's atmosphere. Stars don't pursue things in space. The meteors come through the atmosphere and it looks like they might be pursuing something. So what you have here is the author of the Qur'an has confused meteors with stars. Does this sound like a book with amazing scientific insight? Hardly. Moving on, I haven't said anything medical in a while. Don't think I forgot. The Qur'an deals with embryology in many places. Although believing any of the verses that deal with embryology probably would have gotten me kicked out of first year embryology, there's one in particular that would have probably gotten me kicked out of med school entirely. It's this one here. Now let man but think from what he has created. He is created from a drop emitted, proceeding from between the backbone and the ribs. So what's being said here? The fluid that produces a baby, in other words semen, is emitted from between a man's backbone and his ribs. Now I hope your parents have had this talk with you, because we're about to get a little bit technical. Semen issues forth from here. You have the seminal vesicle here, you got the testes down here, and you got the bulbourethral gland right there, and they travel through the vas deferens and out of there. This, if you notice, this all here is at the most inferior region of the spine. This back here is the sacrum, the bottommost part of the spine, and it is not near the ribs. Now, here are the ribs. These are what you call ribs, and here is the pelvis. So we got ribs, backbone, pelvis. Pelvis, ribs, backbone. Note the pelvis is not between the ribs and the backbone. This argument doesn't have a prayer unless it looks like this. Moving on. That's the argument from scientific accuracy. As you can tell, there's statements that are blatantly inaccurate. Now, before trying to interpret accurate statements, you would have to weigh them against the inaccurate statements, which we will go on to do, I'm sure, in the rebuttal section. But now we're going to talk about the argument for perfect preservation. How much time do I have left? 6 minutes. If you take any longer, it'll be 5 minutes. Okay. So what we have here is a statement in the Qur'an that we have, without doubt, sent down the message, and we will assuredly guard it from corruption. What is being said? It's being said that the Qur'an here is being guarded by God, and He will not allow it to be corrupted. About this, Abdallah has said, none can have any doubt whatsoever regarding the Qur'an's authenticity and immunity and purity from any and every kind of addition or omission or alteration. For there is nothing so authentic in the whole human history as this fact about the Qur'an, that it is the same Qur'an that was presented by the Holy Prophet to the world. It cannot be overemphasized how important the perfect preservation of the Qur'an is to Muslims. It makes the foundation of their faith. However, we find that early Islamic sources say other things. According to Abdallah ibn Umar, the son of the second Khalifa, let none of you say that he has acquired the entire Qur'an, for how does he know what it all is? Much of the Qur'an has been lost. Thus let him say, I have acquired of it only what is available. Ibn Abi Dawood, son of Abu Dawood, said, many of the passages of the Qur'an that were sent down were known only by those who died on the day of Yamama. They were not known by those who survived them, nor were they written down, nor had Abu Bakr, Umar, or Uthman collected the Qur'an by this time, and nor were they found with even one person after them. These are explicit statements by early Muslims that parts of the Qur'an have been irretrievably lost. Beyond this, there was extreme controversy regarding the contents of what should go in the Qur'an. According to Sahih Bukhari, Muhammad had handpicked 4 top teachers of the Qur'an, and the first one he named was Abdullah ibn Masud. Recall that Abdullah ibn Masud was not the one to collect the Qur'an after Muhammad died, it was somebody else, Zayd ibn Thabit. So when Abdullah ibn Masud, Muhammad's top teacher of the Qur'an, got a hold of what Zayd had produced, he said this: "The people have been guilty of deceit in the reading of the Qur'an. I like it better to read according to the recitation of him, the Prophet, whom I love more than that of Zayd ibn Thabit." What a bold statement. Zayd's Qur'an, a deception? The modern Qur'an today, Muhammad's top teacher is calling it a deception. Now, why would Muhammad's chosen teacher of the Qur'an call the modern Qur'an a deception? It turns out that Masud's Qur'an was very different from Zayd's. It had different words, different verses, and even different chapters. 111 chapters versus Zayd's 114. When Uthman demanded Masud's Qur'an to be confiscated and burnt, remember that, Uthman went and said, "Get all the manuscripts and burn them." Ibn Masud did not give it up. In fact, he called all the Muslims in his area to not give up their codices in order to protect them, and Allah would reward them in the day of resurrection for their protecting the Qur'an. That's what Abdullah ibn Masud said. Ultimately, he did have to give it up, though. Now, it could be said that we have one loony here. We have Abdullah, even though Muhammad chose this loony, we could say we have one loony. But that's not the case. One of the other 4 top teachers that Muhammad chose, his name was Ubay ibn Ka'b. He was also known as the best reciter of the Qur'an. Now, Ubay's Qur'an also differed from Zayd's. It had 116 chapters, 2 of which you cannot find in today's Qur'an. It also had different verses, some of which Masud had in his Qur'an, and Zayd does not have, and we do not have them today. Umar, the Khalifa, the second Khalifa, is recorded as having said that the Qur'an was missing the verse of stoning. He was so emphatic about this that he stated he wished he could write it into the Qur'an himself. In fact, Ubay agreed with Umar that this verse should be a part of the Qur'an. He included it in his codex, and so did another man, Abu Musa. A bunch of people are agreeing about this verse needing to be in the Qur'an, yet it is not found in today's Qur'an. Aisha, the wife of Muhammad, is noted as having said that Surah 33 used to be hundreds of verses longer, and we find agreement with her as well. Ubay agreed with her, and many of those verses are said to contain the ones that other people were looking for. Aisha was even noted to correct a verse of the Qur'an, swearing that she heard her correction from Muhammad himself. In addition, if we were to ask Aisha what happened to the verse of stoning and the verse of suckling, she might say, my goat ate it. Indeed, it is true. According to Sunan Ibn Majah, it is said that she kept verses under a cart. Meanwhile, the Holy Prophet died, and we became busy with his funeral. And in that time, a goat came in and ate the verses. The last 2 verses of Surah 9 as well are held in controversy. It is said that only one person had those verses of the Qur'an when they were copied into Uthman's codex. Yet one of the rules for copying verses was that they had to be present with at least 2 people. So we know people today actually who say the Qur'an shouldn't have those verses and they take them out of the Qur'an. So to recap, early Muslim statements said that the Qur'an had been irretrievably lost. 2 of Muhammad's top 4 teachers of the Qur'an disagree with today's Qur'an. Multiple early Muslims believe that verses are missing, possibly hundreds of verses, and multiple sources indicate that a goat ate large portions of the Qur'an. There simply is no indication the Qur'an is perfectly preserved, and every indication that it is not. So when we conducted our history, we determined that the Qur'an did not seem miraculous. Our examination of the body of evidence confirms this diagnosis. The literary challenge presented by the Qur'an is fallacious and failed anyway. The mathematical marvels are also fallacious and would make all sorts of things divinely inspired. The scientific accuracies are not at all accurate, and we'll be discussing those, I'm sure, in the rebuttal section. And the text of the Qur'an has been uniformly corrupted to the point of no return, since all our evidence was burnt by Uthman. It seems that the prognosis for the claim that the Qur'an is miraculous is grim. Both the history and the examination indicate nothing but a pathological process and not a miraculous one. Well, let us see in the rebuttal section if Osama can resuscitate his arguments.
Thank you, Nabeel.